I was looking at all the wrong places to help improve my front rack position. I tried all the exercises and stretches to help improve my front rack position, but nothing seemed to have worked for the long term. But what if I told you there was one exercise that can help unlock your front rack position and improve your lifts? That one exercise is none other than the bench press. Yeah, you heard that right, the bench press. Although traditionally not used as an exercise that helps your mobility, being traditionally seen as an opposing movement to your mobility, the bench press can be your secret weapon to opening up your front rack position when you're about to do any type of overhead pressing, push pressing, jerking. But the devil lies in the details. The details being of how you set up for this movement to help best set you up for the front rack position when performing any type of overhead movement. But first, we must learn and look from the current methods being applied to access the front rack position. There's a common theme to these exercises and drills. I'll let you figure it out first. Foam roll on your lats is a type of myofascial release that aims to reduce the tonicity or tightness at the lats to increase the range of motion and improve your front rack position. Banded distraction uses a resistance band to create a pulling force in the opposing direction that acts as a wedge to separate the joint surfaces to improve the range of motion at the shoulder joint. Lat stretch of the dowel involves performing the opposite action of the lat, placing it in shoulder flexion, external rotation, abduction, stretching the muscle to get into a better front rack position. Barbell roll simulates the front rack position and forces large amounts of external rotation in the hopes of opening up the space at the shoulder joint to increase range of motion and a better front rack position. You saw it, right? I lied. There was two common themes to it. Firstly, all the exercises were limited in load. They either used just the body weight or they used bands, which provide very little resistance. The second thing is they all involve a muscle. The particular muscle that they're focusing on is the lats. The lats being a big part to get you into the front rack position. We're not looking at the position that we're after for the front rack. Firstly, is there a difference between the front rack position for a front squat versus any overhead pressing or even jerking? There's a distinct difference and it involves the hand positions, particularly as you watch the elbow and where the elbow starts for both of the movements. My elbows start in front of me, and with that you see a natural curvature on the upper back, which looks like very much a flexed position. As my hands start to go above my head, that flex position starts to straighten up and it goes into a more of what we call an extended position as our arms straighten up. So when you front squat, there is a need for your elbows to be high and your shoulders protracted forward, because this is ultimately going to allow you to front squat. If I was to try to keep my upper back straight and not allow myself flex, well, it's going to be very hard for me to achieve a front squat in the first place, because when you have an upper back that is flexed, this is generally coupled with your knees being able to bend and your hips being able to bend. If you do not allow it, it's going to find it very difficult for you to get into a deep front squat position. When I'm looking at overhead pressing, my elbows need to start as low as possible, as close to my body as possible. This is ultimately going to allow it to go through this full arc motion and be able to produce force. Whereas if I started with my elbows high when I'm strict pressing, it's going to be very difficult to produce force and get that bar overhead. When it comes to push press or any of the Olympic lifting jerking variants, if my elbows are high, I'm now going to limit the capacity for my arms to be involved. Although they're not the largest muscle, they're still involved in producing force and allowing for that barbell to be propelled overhead. I'm only now relying on my lower body to achieve this. So the idea is I want to bring my elbows as close to my body to achieve this full arc and be a contributor to the force and allow me to get that barbell overhead for when I'm pressing. There might be a correlation between a bigger bench and a bigger strict press overhead. That correlation doesn't exist with a bigger push press or jerk because there's a skill component involved. But void of the skill component, what the bench press can do for us is promote positional learning. It promotes the behavior that we're after and the position that we're after for our front rack. The bench press is going to promote the behavior we're after for the front rack. It's going to promote thoracic extension. So when we set up for the bench press, we want to have that gap between our lower back and the bench press. That's going to once again promote that thoracic extension and the position we're after with our ribs flared, tension in the lower back. Now as the force comes down, the force is thoracic flexion. We've got the arch, we're holding the arch, and as the weight comes down, the weight wants to break that arch position, but we're going to hold that position because we're trying to promote that behavior and hold that position. Ultimately, this is going to build a stronger platform for us to propel that bar above our head. Think about it this way. When a rocket gets launched, it needs a stable surface. That stable surface helps supports the rocket because that rocket's got a lot of punch to it as the fuels ignite and propel it into the sky. The key part is the setup of the bench press. This is one method of setting up for your bench press. Propping your feet up, sliding into position while creating an arch. Bringing the feet down and placing the heels as close as possible to the hips while still being able to drive the heels into the ground to create a stable surface for pressing. I place my bum down onto the bench and still maintain the position of my arch. And I perform touch and go repetitions. As I'm about to strict press, push press, or perform any jerks for my Olympic lifting movements, I'll start with a bench press. I'll usually do about 2 to 3 sets at 6 to 8 repetitions, and I'll go moderately heavy to challenge that position because ultimately load is the thing that's going to promote the behavior that I'm after. I can start with those mobility drills, but ultimately I'm going to finish with the thing that's going to help me propel myself forward to get the most amount of weight on that bar. Thank you for watching this video. If you've gone this far, like the video, drop a comment below on something you have learned. The conversations here simply start. We don't end here. Thank you for watching and helping support Deep Training.